It's the guidance systems and its ability to be assembled in the field, and therefore its manufacturing, that make it a game changer. What the Ukrainians are doing is they have taken something that didn't really exist in the military technology at the front line in these sorts of levels, and they have professionalized it. So President Zelensky is controlling the initiative at the moment, and he is having a massive impact on the Russians and Vladimir Putin personally. Yeah, well, what the Ukrainians have managed to do is take something that they couldn't do beforehand with fixed-wing aircraft and create what is called local air superiority. So they're using their drones to ensure that they have got freedom of maneuver over Russian-controlled airspace and Russian-controlled land. And as the Ukrainians have developed their drones from the short-range FPV drones, where they started to buy them off the shelf, and develop slightly longer range drones, it means that they can control a much greater amount of territory. And they've increased their production into the millions of drones a year. And this is where we're seeing now the Ukrainians are targeting three things. One, the immediate front line. So they're using the shorter range FPV drones as sniper rifles, but they can snipe against tanks and armoured vehicles as well, out to about 10, 15, 20 kilometres. They've then got these medium range drones that can go up to hundreds of kilometres. And these are the ones that they're using to interdict the likes of the land bridge from Russia down to northern Crimea, to attack the northern Crimean bridges and to attack into Crimea. And what they're doing is, their primary target is air defence systems first and foremost, electronic warfare and communication systems second, and then what that does is it creates this bubble for them to fly further attack drones at will through, knowing that the Russians can't do very much with them. And then this is combined with their very long range attacks that they're doing against Russian oil and gas infrastructure, defence manufacturing capabilities, and the likes. And they're hitting all three levels simultaneously. This is a very sophisticated, highly coordinated action by the Ukrainians, and it's using primarily Ukrainian developed technology.
And with the Zozulia drone, can you explain why these long-range drones are so critical for Ukraine, and why they've been so important in turning the tide?
Well, the Zulia drone is an interesting one. It's got a range of up to about 1,100 kilometres. That's with a 50-kilogram warhead. Now, it looks like a little model aircraft. It's got normal wing configuration, a high T-level tail wing, and a single propeller. But it flies slow. It flies at between 100 130 kilometres per hour. It can go faster, but that will impact range. It's the guidance systems and its ability to be assembled in the field, and therefore its manufacturing, that make it a game changer. It's cheap. It's very cheap. The Ukrainians can make them in their thousands, their tens of thousands, without any problems whatsoever. It can be taken into the field very quickly, assembled, fired, and there's very little signature from where it lifts off, and then the crew can move on elsewhere. And then the real art is in the way it navigates, because it uses a combination of an internal navigation system using GPS and AI-based imagery system. So it's got an imagery map in its electronic brain inside, and it has rehearsed the route it needs to take, avoiding Russian air defences and all the rest of it. So it doesn't fly straight, it'll zigzag patterns through the countryside to get to the target that's at. And it's got in its electronic brain, a 3D picture of the target. So it's very, very accurate and could take it into there. And therefore that helps make it resistant to jamming. Now, in the initial control stages, and where there can be control and where there may be video coming back, the Ukrainians are using Starlink terminals, and that's critical to what's going on. But even if that gets interrupted, the automatic system, guidance system within these particular drones will then click in and take it to the target, because it is rehearsed that route in its brain. It can see it electronically, it can see it in 3D, and it will just fly that route until it gets to the target, and will dive in to the target with a 50-kilogram warhead. And 50 kilograms will do a lot of damage to not just a vehicle, but some critical infrastructure and other things.
And the 422nd Regiment, they're behind a lot of these, sophisticated drone operations. So how crucial is their role in, coming up with new techniques?
Well, the different drone regiments and drone companies are critical. The particular report that we have is from as you said, the 422nd Regiment. In fact, it's from the Sparta company of the 422nd Regiment. The Ukrainians love giving out the details of who it is that's flying these, because that's all part of the psychological operations that go with it as well. You have to remember there's a physical effect to the drones, but also there's a psychological effect. The troops on the front line are petrified every time they hear a drone. They don't know whether it's going to come and get them. And now that the Ukrainians can hit much deeper, the Russians that are there, you will see all of these reports on Telegram and other channels, because they're monitoring different things about the Sparta company of the 422nd, and they will see reports of their successes and how they're destroying everything, and that has a psychological impact on the Russians' ability to continue to want to stay and fight, and that's why we get a lot of these reports that come out. What the Ukrainians are doing is they have taken something that didn't really exist in the military technology at the front line in these sorts of levels, and they have professionalized it to a level where they're now in a position where they can teach the rest of the world on how to use drone technology properly from a military perspective. And this is a lesson that's being picked up by the UK and by other countries. And it's not just offensive drone capability, it's defensive drone capability. So anti-drone drones as well. The Ukrainians have got all of these fantastic regiments with great numbers and names, but also with catchy titles like Sparta Company.
And just going in on Crimea a bit, I mean, there's been, this massive campaign against Crimea where primarily a lot of drones are being launched from. So how important is that, just kind of, drone attacks on Crimea and isolating the peninsula into changing the momentum of the war?
Putin was using Crimea for two things. One, as a sort of secure base to launch drones, rockets, and aircraft from. And secondly, as a logistic base so that he could store military supplies and everything else. And with that, a secure area for command and control. Not just for where it was traditionally naval operations out into the Black Sea. Sevastopol, even though it was part of Ukraine, was always the headquarters for the Russian Black Sea Fleet. That shows how close relationships were before the war first started in 2014 between Ukraine and Russia. But it's also important for air operations and supporting ground operations. Ukraine realizes that it can't capture Crimea from a Normandy-style D-Day type landing. And they also recognize that Crimea is at the center of Vladimir Putin's psyche about wanting to hold and take and hold Ukraine. And therefore, what they're doing is they're attacking Putin's center of gravity, this desire to have Ukraine. Putin had his honeymoon there. A lot of his inner circle, the oligarchs, go there on holiday and have got apartments and other properties on Crimea because the beaches are great and the weather's fantastic, and it was seen as the playground for the wealthy Russians from Moscow and St. Petersburg. And what Ukraine is doing is they're effectively starving it. They've stopped resupply coming in from the southeast by ferries that carry railway carriages across the strait between the Sea of Azov and the Black Sea. They've attacked the Kirch Bridge, and the rail links and road links have got reduced capacity on there after a successful attack that completely damaged it to an unusable state for a year. They're building up, I think, the Ukrainians to another attack on that. The Ukrainians have wiped out a lot of the air defense systems across Crimea, making it easier for them to fly with impunity across there. And now the Ukrainians are attacking logistic supplies going in through the northern bridges and making it impossible for the Russians to get in. The impact that there has been is there is now no fuel for any civilians in Crimea. All the fuel is being used for government purposes and military purposes only. And that will impact the support that the Russian military will have in there. And the Ukrainians are slowly but surely just picking off every military base and every military establishment. And they don't need to physically invade Crimea to render it useless for Vladimir Putin and to give that real psychological kick to Putin. And that's what they're doing. Effectively, they're laying siege using drones, both naval drones and air drones. It's a new modern approach to dealing with territorial issues.
Is this whole drone campaign, just the start of a massive shift in momentum. I mean, when we look at key points in the war, there's like the 2023 counteroffensive, where Ukraine are gaining a lot of land. Could this, this moment in time, summer 2026, be seen as kind of just the start of a new chapter in the war? And, will drones play a huge part in that?
What we're seeing is definitely the start of a new chapter in the war. It's taken Ukraine a significant amount of time to develop the technology, build the manufacturing capacity, and build the numbers of drones that they have done. And they're starting to have an effect, because Vladimir Putin himself has admitted to the difficulties that Ukrainian drone attacks are having on fuel supplies across Russia. And that is where we're going to see any real change. Whenever people look at conflict and you get commentators turn around and say and try and assess who's winning, they tend to look at the front line and go, Russia has captured more territory this month than Ukraine has done, so Ukraine is on the back foot and Ukraine is therefore losing. It's not that simple. That is a tactical level assessment. And actually on the front line, Ukraine has stopped Russian advances in most places. They're still probing through in a number, but started to push the Russians back in others. But the tactical front line is, in effect, military terms, we describe it as it's hit a stalemate position, i.e. no one side is going to win or to be able to achieve anything dramatic there. So if you can't win at the tactical level and you're not achieving anything and you're effectively stuck, you have to then work at the operational level or the strategic level. Now, the strategic level is the international relationships. And we've seen Donald Trump not comment in support of Putin for a long time. And we've actually seen Donald Trump start to give more support for Ukraine. So that's a bit of strategic success. But at the operational level, and this is the bit that bridges that tactical and that strategic, that's where you're carrying out your deep strikes into the rear areas of Russian forces that are supporting the front line. Those logistic lines, that land bridge that goes from Russia to Crimea, it also resupplies the fighting troops that are in the illegally occupied areas of eastern Ukraine. And you're attacking the wherewithal to get supplies to those supply routes. Therefore, you're attacking your fuel sites, you're attacking ammunition dumps, you're attacking defense manufacturing capability, so the Russians can't manufacture enough weapons to be able to get to the front line. And you're attacking the rail routes, which are significantly important when it comes to Russian resupply. And the Ukrainians are doing that with increasing success every week, and they're getting better and better and better at it. So it is changing the tide of war. And if you put all of that together at the minute, my assessment is that Ukraine is winning. Putin is beginning to realize that. And he's got nothing that can stop this Ukrainian momentum. And that is something that is significant. So President Zelensky is controlling the initiative at the moment. He is controlling how this is going. And he is having a massive impact on the Russians and Vladimir Putin personally.
Thank you. I mean, we've seen all the setbacks that Russia are having in terms of like recruitment numbers. And, there was a stat the other day where it said, the average life expectancy of a Russian soldier is about 20 minutes once you get on the front line, probably because of all this drone superiority. So just going on what you said about Ukraine winning, could they kind of break the deadlock, the stalemate on the front line by kind of ripping up Russia from the inside out, just by, keep kind of peppering the interior of Russia and, sort of deep strikes within the country?
Ukrainian tactics can break the deadline on the front line, but you don't have to win on the front line for a military to collapse and to withdraw. We just look back in history. We look at the United States in Vietnam. The United States were winning every tactical battle that there was in Vietnam, yet they had to withdraw from the country completely, and because of the sustained attacks that were happening at the operational level from the Viet Cong, and therefore the impact that was having politically in the United States and everything else. This is where the Ukrainians are following a similar tactic. The same thing with NATO forces and allied forces in Afghanistan. The Taliban never won a single tactical battle, but they played it at the operational level and the strategic level in a way that it then became unpalatable for NATO contributing countries, and they withdrew in that very chaotic withdrawal that the British gave the name Operation Pitting to. So the Ukrainian attacks, long-range attacks on logistic lines, logistic supplies, command and control, and manufacturing and oil and gas infrastructure will stop the Russians being able to impact what's going on the front line. What does that mean? That means that the Russians are just having to throw more manpower at it. And that's why we're getting the casualty rates down to about 20 minutes for the average Russian frontline soldier. Ukraine can produce enough drones to act as sniper rifles. A drone will take out a soldier very easily. The Russians can't keep up with that in the same position. It's going to become increasingly difficult with the Russians, but it will only start to become painful in the front line when Putin runs out of people. And he's got a huge supply of people. And therefore, it is more likely he's going to run out of economic and political support before he runs out of people. And therefore, I'm not expecting to see anything dramatic happening on the front line before something dramatic happens at that internal political level. However, the Ukrainians are continuing to probe across what is a huge front line, 1,000 kilometers between Aberdeen and London. In sort of putting it in, and there is always the potential that at some place in there, as the Russians become weaker and weaker and weaker, the Ukrainians can break through. Now, if they break through, whether the Ukrainians have got the ability to generate mass in military terms to break through and to physically push the Russians back and then secure and occupy the territory, it's a huge amount of territory, and that is something that. If the Ukrainians got that wrong, they could overstretch themselves. The Russians could counterattack, and it could have a more negative effect. So, in military terms, it's a very, very complex operation, very complex decision-making process to make. But the Ukrainians are on the front foot at the tactical level, at the operational level, and at the strategic level, and that's the way you want to keep it going. A balance between all of them.